Hey everybody, it's Mike Sherwood and welcome to my YouTube channel, Don't Waste Your Life, where I remind you to be present, to be happy, and to be thankful. If you're new to the channel, I'd ask that you subscribe below. And if you're returning, thanks for coming back again. So this week we're going to talk about how I maximize relationships. This kind of sounds like a weird kind of topic, but bear with me. As we've kind of entered COVID and some of the different challenges that we've had with that, on staying close to others and being able to maintain relationships, it's just become even harder. As you go through different life stages, you get married, you have kids, you have sick or elderly parents. All this changes the relationships that you have. And when I'm talking about relationships, I'm specifically talking about friendships. This isn't families, although some of this could be incorporated to that. And it's not necessarily something that would be applying to work. So it's more like your personal relationships that you'd have. So in this video, there's going to be 6 topics we're going to go through on how I maximize my relationships. Everybody kind of has their own opinion on how to do this, but this is the way I would do it. So for the first one, understand the rules of engagement and be clear about that. So what does that mean? So every friendship is unique and a little bit different. And so depending upon how that friendship is set up, the rules will be different. And not only that, that can change over seasons of life. So if you have close friends, obviously it can evolve and change. So like I have a couple lifelong friends, Chris and Travis. I've known them for a very long time. And our friendship has had to change over time because now we have more responsibilities. Versus before when we were back in college or we were high school students, we can kind of do whatever we want. It didn't really matter. So now that we have responsibility, it changes the way that we interact and the time that we have available and what we can give in those relationships. So again, it's about setting expectations. So I'll talk about an example. My good friend Mark, he'll call me, and he usually always calls me when he's in the car. So he'll be in the car and he'll be driving and he'll call me, just try to get a hold of me. And we have kind of like a said thing where the other person will try to pick up the phone if we're available, because we know that that's kind of like the in-between time that we have. So like he may be driving to work, he may be driving home from work, and he has like maybe 10 or 15 minutes to kind of catch up. So obviously if I don't have time, I won't answer the phone, or I'll just text him and say, hey, we'll catch up later, or I'll try to call him back. And the thing is, this kind of just evolved from just knowing that we're both busy. He has 3 kids, he works, his wife works, they're very busy. So I'm busy. I only have 1 kid, but my wife and I both work, and we don't have family in the area, so we're very busy too. So it's just kind of understanding what the expectations are and being okay with that. So number 2 is understanding limitations. So sometimes in these different relationships, you won't be getting something that you want out of it, or the other person may not be getting something that they want out of it. And so you need to understand there's going to be limitations, and through these seasonal life changes, you have to be okay with that. That's just how it is. I think the worst thing you can do is believe that everything is going to be exactly the way it was always. It's not possible. So you got to understand that the expectations can change over time. You got to be okay with that. So I think that number 3 is being open to renegotiation, or talking about it openly. This doesn't sound like it has to be really that serious, but I sometimes this can just kind of organically happen. But sometimes you just need to verbalize it and talk it out and explain, hey, this is what's going on in my life. This is what I need. I need your friendship, or I need this, or they may do that. And so I think depending upon the relationship determines whether you really need to do this. Some people are like, oh, dude, this sounds so formal. But I also think renegotiating and talking about it is helpful for you to understanding where those pain points might be and where feelings could be hurt. And so I think renegotiation, talking through that stuff is very important. Number 4 is to organize relationships in a way that makes sense to you. Now, everybody's a little bit different on how they interact. And so some people schedule their entire lives. Some people are very spontaneous. Even when they have kids, they continue to be spontaneous, which I don't know how they do this, because I feel like with kids, traveling and doing all that sports stuff, and then if you have multiple kids, it must get even harder. I haven't gone through that journey yet of getting into sports, but I know how I run my life now compared to what I used to run. I used to be a very spontaneous person, last minute for everything. The challenge with that is nothing ever got done when I wanted it. And so one thing I really give my wife a lot of credit for is that she would say, what gets scheduled gets done. And I've even seen that with some of our friendships where we all have young kids and we'll get together for hot pot. So it's the Nemos, we'll get together for hot pot and we'll hang out, our kids will spend time together. And so I give my wife a lot of credit where she's able to bring us all together, and Kyle's wife as well is able to bring us together to be able to spend time together. And really what it is, I think the key to it is that they schedule it. Like, they make time to schedule it. So partway through us having hot pot or whatever, they're already talking about their next meeting to get together. It just makes it much easier to make sure that that relationship stays strong and that we continually see each other over time. Because I think if you don't do that, it just doesn't happen. Because if you have to like take the effort and energy to actually like plan and do that at different times spontaneous, I find it hard. Now, other people may not find that it's hard. So I think everybody's different. And so I can hear people groaning and saying, Mike, that's great, but my friends don't work that way, or my family doesn't work that way. I hear you. But the thing is what I'll say is like, try it and see, and just kind of explain the expectations of what you're trying to do. And that will really help. So there's 3 sub areas here that I want to discuss. So number 1, if you feel this is too hard, potentially maybe the relationship isn't something you should hang on to. It's something that you should let go of. And I know that sounds bad because you're like, well, hey, you're giving me advice on how to maximize relationships, but then you're saying, well, I gotta let go. But like, sometimes there's certain relationships that you do need to let go of. And it's not to say that they've outlived their usefulness, but like, it's just something that you need to transition and change over time. So that you just need to keep that in mind and continue to move forward. And, when you think about these relationships, I'll talk about this in another point, you just need to think about like what value you got out of that relationship, and remember the good times. Because sometimes, I'll give you an example, like with my small group, there was a small group I really enjoyed. We got together very regularly, and I was very sad when it kind of got broke up. We went different directions because, I really love those relationships and I kind of counted on them. But then, what it was is that we all needed to continue to grow in different areas. So we all kind of went in different directions. But I still stayed close to those people and we still meet up. It's just that sometimes relationships change. So the second thing is having a little bit more patience and understanding where people come from. So you need to understand that just because people do something differently than what you do doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just how they do it. And so instead of just shaking your head and saying, oh my gosh, they never planned, they couldn't plan themselves out of a paper bag or something like that, or I don't know why they're so spontaneous, or I don't know why they got to do everything down to the minute. Just understand that everybody approaches these same life problems in slightly different ways, and what ways work for them and for their family. And so I also kind of equate it to like parenting. Do I think parenting, there's one way to do it? No, I think there's multiple ways to do it. And everybody does a little bit different, and it's what works for them and for their kids. And I guarantee probably if we looked at study would say, from a child rearing perspective, you compare this child to this child, it's going to be about the same in the outcome. So that's what I'm saying, like everybody's a little bit different on how they approach it. So number 3 in this sub area is to talk to that person and explain to them why you're doing this. So I know it sounds like maybe like a confrontation, but like I think when you sit down and explain stuff to people in detail, they tend to be more understanding. The way I think about this is like Atticus Finch, To Kill a Mockingbird, would say, walk a mile in a man's shoes and you'll understand them. And so I really think by explaining it to people, they'll have a better understanding of like why you're doing that. And then just ask them, well, what do you think? And they may be able to come up with a potential solution. And I feel like just in society in general, I feel like we've kind of just gone with the flow so much that we've, anytime something has a little bit of friction, we kind of just want to shy away from it or just push away from it. And so I think I'm not trying to be confrontational or put people on the spot, but I think sometimes having these discussions where you're coming together to discuss it can actually be more beneficial to strengthening the relationship and preserving the relationship long term. So number 5 is to consider that the relationship has run its course. Now I know this sounds horrible that, I'm saying, hey, you should break off this relationship. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that potentially you and that person, or you or that person could have changed in such a way or had a life situation change that the relationship is no longer the way it was and you need to move on. One way is you could talk about it. The other way is just to kind of let it organically, fall away. And again, I'm not suggesting you just end a bunch of relationships. The idea is that I think the problem with human beings is that we tend to be, we like to latch on to things that are familiar, and we want things to always be that way. But you also need to understand that everybody's evolving and changing over time. They're becoming the person that that God has meant them to be, or what our creation has meant them to be, and that could be in a slightly different direction than where you were originally heading. That can happen. And so I think the most important thing is here, and probably about 98% of all relationships fall in this pattern, is that people are going to change. And those 2%, those close people, you can pick up those relationships just where you're at, because you're so close. And even though you could still be different than each other, but you have enough commonality to be able to understand. It's almost like a spider web on like how to like wire back to each other. And so that doesn't happen for every relationship. So that's just something to keep in mind. So with that, number 6, and this is more of a practical tip that I do in order to kind of stay connected to people. I would say I'm a pretty social person. I like to stay close to people, and I like to remember things about different people. And I would say I have probably a handful of close friends. And then I have like my next ring of friends, the friends I know pretty well, and I know about them pretty deeply, because at one point in time, I was probably super close to them. And then outside of that, I have a lot of acquaintances that I try to be as close as I can. And so everybody kind of has these 3 rings, and they have different amounts of people. And I would say it kind of changes when you get married and you have kids or you have other responsibilities. Back when I was in college, I had lots of friends that I would socialize with, and in different groups. And so I think one practical tip that I would tell people that really helped me is to have scheduling time in to follow up with people. And it can be just like an email, or it can just be like a quick phone call or a text to maintain that relationship, just to check in with them, see how they're doing. And so what I do is like every couple weeks, I have a certain list of people that I kind of go through and cycle through. And I basically say, hey, text this person, or hey, do this. And so I found that helps me to kind of maintain that relationship and to keep them top of mind. And including like some people ask me for prayer requests. So like then I'll look through that and I'll be like, oh, so-and-so had a prayer request. And then the next time I talk to them, I'll be like, hey, I was praying for you, and this is what I, was praying about, and just ask them how they're doing. And so again, I'm not trying to make this like almost like salesy, like kind of follow up, but the idea is like, if you want to maintain those relationships, you do need to make some effort, and they need to make some effort to do that. And, we are social beings. And so I think regardless of how many people you stay close to over your life, we are social beings. But it's interesting because Ryan Holiday says something about this and I think he got it from somebody else, is there's 3 things you could focus on: family, work, and scene. And family meaning, your close family and your close friends, spending time with them and doing things. And then your work, the thing that you do in order to make a living to help, provide for your family. And then the third thing is scene, and that could be like fun stuff, other social activities that are kind of outside those other 2. And the thing is you can only pick 2 of them and be successful at 2 of them. If you try to pick all 3, you'll be successful at none. And I really prescribe to this, is that some of those close relationships are going to fall under that family, but then also some of those other relationships are going to fall into that scene. Or so even like me, I'm close to some of my badminton folks, but like there's a lot of badminton folks for me to be close to. And so some of those are in my family or like close friends, and then other ones are kind of in my scene, which is like part of my social outing. Like I can't keep in touch with all of them. It's too much. So anyways, this video, as I mentioned, was about how I maximize relationships and kind of the things that I keep in mind as I'm kind of, interacting and going about my day. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, and we'll see you soon, guys. Thank you.